In my last video, I talked about this Benro 34CLV leveling tripod and how great it was. And I also mentioned how useful it would be for shooting panoramics. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how I shoot panoramics using this tripod and how useful it is, and also using a great camera remote control app called Shutter. So the first thing you need to do when shooting a pano is it's very important to get the head of the tripod level. Now the reason for that is obviously when you're shooting your ordinary image, you're using the spirit level and you're moving all this around so that you can get the image level, the horizon straight. Now the problem with that is that that's fine for shooting a single image. But when you're shooting a stitched panoramic, we're going to shoot one and then pan around and shoot multiple photos. And as we pan around, if this is not straight, then your image is going to pan like this. And then when you stitch your images together, it's not going to be straight. And it's going to be messy and you're going to lose parts of the top and the bottom. So it's critical that you get this straight. So the first thing we're going to do is level the head. And that's the great thing about this, you know, it's so easy to do. All you need is this little spirit level. I won't go into the details, watch my other video for that. But basically you can just simply put this spirit level on here and find the little lever here and very simply move the head till you get this bit level. Then we check this side and and get it level there. It's level there. Slight bit of adjustment here. There we go. That's level there. Perfect. Fine adjustments. You can make really nice, easy, fine adjustments. There you go. So this is now perfectly level. And what that means is that now, when I get all this level, now people would ordinarily use a dedicated tripod, a dedicated pano head that simply swivels with no adjustment this way. But I'm using this Benro geared head, and I'll show you that this Benro geared head is also really good. In fact, I prefer it because you can make really fine movements with it. So the first thing I'm going to do is level it up here. Okay, so yeah, now we'll adjust this axis here to get this. Now we got the green, that's showing us that that is now perfectly level. Okay, and now if I turn it this way, it stays green. And if I turn it this way, it stays green. We get a bit of vibration, there we go. We turn it this way, you can see now as we're panning around from left to right, everything is staying nicely level. We put it there, it's green. Put it there, it's green. So as we pan across this seam that we're going to take multiple photos of and stitch together, the whole thing stays perfectly level. So once you've got everything nice and level, the next step is try to visualize the image that you want to take. Now there's a really useful app here I'm going to show you called Magic Canon, which is quite useful for just getting a bit of an idea about what you want to shoot. So here, see, you can actually zoom in, get a bit of an idea of your composition, and you can also set aspect ratios on there. Now you haven't got too many, unfortunately, 3:2. So I usually just go with this one, 16:9, just to get a bit of an idea. And you can see that what I really want to do here is try to capture those colourful trees down there. Those trees still with a bit of spring colours left on. That big, lovely big tree up there. And then come along, I want to get the church here. So here we've got these two trees here and this tree here. And I want to get the church, obviously. And that mountain peak, that's the mountain peak is called Storžič. And I want to try to come around here and get the rest of these mountains, the whole mountain chain, because this mountain chain here is called the Kamnik Alps. It's beautiful mountain chain here in Slovenia. And some of these trees down below. So that's, I want to kind of come, I don't want to go too wide. Some people, you know, it's very tempting just to go all the way around, try to capture as much as possible. But then you end up with a super wide pano that's super thin and not really much use at all. I find that a 16:9 is normal, or a 3:1, 4:1 even, or a 4:2, something like that tends to work well. So that's what I'm going to try to go for. Okay. Now, the other thing, now I will say this first of all, I'm not an expert on panoramics, and I've only really started shooting them since I got this. I did know how to do them, and I did do them years ago, but you know, I couldn't be bothered mucking around with the legs trying to get everything straight and everything. So, you know, I stopped doing it for a while. But then when I got this tripod and it was so much easier to get it level, I started trying it again. So I'm going to basically tell you what I've learned, okay? And the first thing is, when shooting the image, rather than shooting on the horizontal like I've got here now, I'm actually going to turn it around and shoot on the vertical. And I'm going to shoot vertical frames instead of horizontal frames. Now the biggest reason for that is that obviously on the vertical you've got more pixels, and you're going to stitch the images together anyway, so you're going to end up with loads and loads of pixels. And if you shoot on the horizontal, you're going to get loads of pictures on the horizontal because you shoot multiple shots, but you're not going to get many on the vertical. So it's much better to actually turn it around and maximize the pixels on the vertical side too. Plus, you're very likely going to have to crop in. Once you've stitched your pano together, there's going to be some edges that you're going to have to crop out first of all, but I'm also most likely going to crop in to get the aspect ratio, the image that I'm going to want to take. I'm going to shoot wider than I need to. I'm not going to try to get everything precise. It's not that easy to do. I'm going to go wider, and I'm going to capture more around the top and bottom and around the sides, for that reason that I want to be able to crop in and basically crop in and get the photo that I want from everything that I'm going to capture. So the first thing I'll do is turn this. So as I mentioned before, I'm going to use this great app called Shutter. Now this is a camera remote control app that's available for iPhone only, unfortunately, not Android. And you can use it with the Canon, Sony and Fujifilm cameras. Now I'll talk more about this app in future videos, but for now I'm going to show you how this app is really, really useful. So you can see on the screen now that I'm connected remotely, wirelessly, to the camera, and I can now see my composition. And what's really great about this is, if you look here, I can actually choose which aspect ratio I look in. Now I'm doing the full aspect ratio for now, so that's fine. I can put the grid, I got the grids on there, I can actually change the grid view if I want, or I can turn it off if I want. There we go, so I can just turn it off completely. I've got the histogram there, so I can check my exposure is all good and correct. And more importantly though, I can adjust my settings on here if I want to, but I'm not going to do that because I'm going to do everything manually, and I'll show you why. I got the camera set up on the vertical. I've got a 2-stop medium grad on there because that white of the cloud and the sky is quite bright, and the foreground's not quite so bright, so just to balance it off. So I've got that set nicely. Now you can see on the screenshot of Shutter that I can see everything. Yeah, I can turn off and on any aspect ratio. If I want to change the aspect ratio, I can, but I'm going to keep it at full, of course. I can turn a grid, I can see put the grids on if I want to, or all sorts of things. And I can also see the histogram, so I can check my exposure. And that's important too, because then what I want to do is, as I move around the scene slowly, I want to check that the exposure is going to be just right. So at the moment I got f11 ISO 400, which is going to give me, if we turn this back slowly, it's going to give me about 1/125th of a second shutter speed. So I want it fairly fast because there's a bit of a breeze. I've got a short lens on, so it's not such a big deal. So I can see that the light is fairly consistent across the scene, and that exposure works quite well, I think. The histogram is nice here. If I come right the way around to the furthest edge of my scene here, the histogram is still good, the exposure is still good at that. Let's have a look, let's focus on there. That does about 180, but it's still a bit bright. Let's move about there, let's focus on there. So 1/80th of a second there. Still 1/25th because that church is very bright and the clouds are very bright. So I think if I set at that, now I'm going to switch it to manual exposure. And the reason for that simply is that I don't want to change the exposure as I move around. So you can see that when I move to the right here, when I had it, I've got it on aperture priority at the moment, so I keep it at f11, but then the exposure would have been 1/80th of a second there, then it would have been 1/25th of a second. I don't want that. I want an even exposure right the way across the scene. So for that reason, I'm going to choose my settings and set them manually so they stay consistent throughout. So I'm going to switch it to manual. There we go. So I've still got f11 again, and I'm going to take that down. If I take that down to 1/25th of a second now, you can see that that's quite dark and a little bit underexposed actually. But I'm going to take my main image from here actually. Yeah, this is where I want to start. So I'll probably come around here to capture all this anyway, just to make sure. But really, I want my frame to start about here. And I'm going to come around to here. So that's important. If I get that at 1/25th of a second. Now, if I take it down, a great thing about shutter as well is that I can adjust that now. So I can come in here and I can actually take that down to 1/100th of a second. Now I've got it a bit brighter there. Maybe a touch more. Let's take it down to 1/80th of a second. And I can see on the histogram that nothing's blown out. Let's come back around here to the farthest end. There you go. So that's exposed nicely for that, actually. Let's maybe take it up to 1/100. Let's see. I don't want it too dark. It's about 1/180th. 1/80th of a second there. 1/80th of a second there. I don't want to burn out those clouds, that's important. I got 1/80th of a second there. Take that right the way around to the farthest end of my composition. So that's quite bright. That's quite bright. That's good. That's good. So I'm going to try my first one with 1/80th of a second, f11 ISO 400. It's a fairly, it's a bit slow, but there's a little bit of a breeze, but there's got a short lens on and everything's quite stable, so I think we'll be all right with that shutter speed. So now, the moment of magic. Now I'm going to take my shots. So I'm going to come across here and start at my furthest edge. Now, as I said, let's move that out of the way. Now you can see on here, now this is not where I want to start. I want to start over here. So I'm going to take my first shot, maybe starting about here. And then as I pan around, I'm going to overlap each shot around about a third or more. Sometimes I do a bit more just to be on the safe side. Okay, and the trick now is to then pan around shooting multiple shots. Now the reason I like this is because it means that I will not touch this at all. In fact, I always have this on sometimes if I ever want to switch between the shutter app and this. But in this case, I'm going to remove it because it's a bit windy and I don't want any kind of vibration in my shot. So I'm going to remove that and I'm going to purely use the shutter app for this. Now you see, now again, the next bit is the focus. So my main focus is going to be this church. I'm going to focus on that church, and now I'm going to switch it to manual focus. Now I've got it on manual focus. Now my focus will not move either because I don't want it focusing on different parts of the scene. Okay, I've set my focus F11 on the church, so the church is going to be my focal point, and right the way across the scene, that's not going to change, and neither is the exposure going to change. So let's go. So let's move around here to my first. Where am I going to start? I'm going to start here. Gives me lots of space either side. Now I'm not going to go that wide, as I said. And I'm going to take my first shot here. So again, using the app to trigger the shutter so I don't have to touch the camera at all. Okay, that's simple. Now before I start though, what I normally do is put my hand in front, take one shot, and that helps me find the starting shot in my sequence when I go to the editing, when I go to edit the photo, because you've got loads and loads of photos and it's hard to know which is the start of the sequence and which is the end. So my hand in front, that denotes the start. Okay, and now that's my first shot. So you can see on the shutter app that when I turn around, I'm not going to turn all the way. I'm going to come about 3/4 of the way in, and I'm going to take my next shot. Then I'm going to come 3/4 of the way in, lovely, and that's my next shot, perfectly exposed where I want it to be especially. And then I'm going to come around here for the next shot, shoot that one, for the next one. Beautiful. And that really is going to be the end, but I'm going to just take one more, as I say, just to be on the safe side, so I got a bit to play with either side, top and bottom. And to finish off, one with the hand, so I know then that all the pictures between my hands are the sequence of shots that I'm looking for. So that's my first sequence shot. Now you'll notice if we look at the top here, that lovely bit of cloud is very, very close to the top of the composition. So in that shot sequence that I just took, it's very possible when I stitch them together, depending how it comes out, that I might lose that, and I don't want to lose that. I hope I won't, but just to be on the safe side, I'm going to shoot a few more, and I'm going to also come out a bit wider to get some of that cloud, get plenty of space at the top of that cloud, just to make sure that I don't lose it when I crop. So the light's getting nice now, the sun's getting lower, and it's turning into a really beautiful evening. I won't be here for sunset, unfortunately, but still a nice time. Now, that was shot at 50mm. And the reason for that is, if I go any wider, you start going to wide angle territory, and then you start getting some barrel distortion around the edges, and then it can be hard to stitch together. So that's something I want to avoid. And so I've either got a choice. I can sometimes come back a touch, not too much. If you go too wide, you get too much distortion. Or what I can do is, if we look on the screen here, I can also adjust my composition here. So I can look now at placing the church there on a lower third. That's nice. Let's come down a touch. See? That's nice, see? And then I'm coming over here and I'm giving myself a bit more space, and I come back at just a teeny touch from 50, about 40, not too much. And now I've got lots of space at the top of that cloud. I got a nice, there you go, some nice cloud there now, and some nice light falling on that hill. And I've still got my two trees there, well in the composition. So they're well in, so even if I have to crop a bit at the bottom here and at the top, I'm still going to keep those in my frame. So I'm going to try shoot another one now like this. So again, checking the light hasn't changed. Still at 1/80th of a second. I got a good exposure across the scene. That's not too bright. Lovely, lovely. And we're starting to see those mountains over there. So if I can show you, those mountains there are the Karavanke Alps, and the mountains, as I mentioned, behind the church are the Kamnik Alps there. Much of the right side of the Kamnik Alps is still in some low cloud. Storage is just starting to get covered now. It's looking good. So I think I'm going to stick with this. Let's see how that cloud is moving. That top cloud over there is moving. Plenty of space there. That's nice. So I'm going to go with this one now. Again, let's start here. So because I moved it, I'm going to switch my autofocus back on. Make sure I focus on that church again. Switch it off again, and we're away. Again. Let's take the first shot, and let's do one sequence now. There we go. So that's how it's done. Those clouds are moving nicely, so at the end I'll take you into the digital darkroom, into Photoshop, and I'll show you how I use Photoshop to stitch it back together. Now, one of the other reasons I didn't do panos years ago is because I really couldn't be bothered with all the work of stitching them together. But now Photoshop's AI does a magnificent job. Now, whatever you think of AI, at the end of the day, Photoshop's AI for things like this, for tasks like this, is amazing, and it does a magnificent job. And it does it, depending on the speed of your computer. I got a faster one now, so it does it really, really fast and saves you so much time and work. It's unreal. While we're here, let's shoot a few a variety of sequences and see which one produces the best results. And you can also go in closer as well. So let's go in for some closer shots too. You can see how using shutter and looking at the screen really helps you to find the composition that you want. Much easier to see this screen actually than the screen on there. Let's try that one. And sometimes as well during the sequence you can even frame it up that one of the framed shots will on its own will also be good. Beautiful. So I'll stick around here, shoot a few different sequences, and then we'll go into the digital darkroom, as I said, and see what we can produce from these shots. So here we are in the so-called digital darkroom. Now there are several programs that you can use to stitch your panorama together. I personally use Adobe Photoshop. You could use Adobe Lightroom if you have it too, or any other. But for the purpose of this video, I'm going to use Adobe Photoshop. So inside Photoshop, you simply come to File and Automate and Photo Merge. And now this is where Photoshop's AI will seamlessly and automatically merge all of your images, stitch them all together perfectly. It's absolutely brilliant. I love it. Saves so much time, and it's part of the reason why I do more panoramas now than I used to before. So the first thing you do is come in here and you've got your layout. Now auto is first, and I always use auto. 99% of the time auto does it perfectly. You don't need to do anything else. Sometimes though, if it messes it up or it doesn't look right, or you've got a very wide pano that's quite difficult to stitch together, you can try one of the others like perspective or cylindrical, but again we'll use auto for this one. So you come over here, source files. So this is where you're going to insert the source files that you want Photoshop to stitch together. So you simply come to browse, open up the folder where you've got all of your images here. Now you can see here the purpose of using the hand. Now I can very easily and quickly pick out the sequence of images I want for each panorama that I shot. So here's my first one here, there, and then you can see here's the second one, and so on. And you can see here that these are similar, so these weren't. This was the end of one, this was the start of a new one, and a new one there. Here you can see I've got more. So I'll take the first one first of all, so I'll select the first image here, and I'll hold down Shift and select all of them. If you're using a Mac, whatever is equivalent to the Shift and click. So I've selected them, I come and click OK, and that inserts all of the images. Now I'm doing it straight from the raw. If you want to process your images first into a TIFF and then use the TIFFs, you can do. You can also use JPEGs. I wouldn't advise it personally. I would either create it from a high resolution TIFF or do it straight from the raw files, which is what I do. So come in here, I've got all my images selected. Now come down here, you've got obviously automatically ticked blend images together, which is what you want. I use this vignette removal. Now although I didn't shoot with a wide angle, I have found previously that if you don't select this, sometimes where the images were stitched together, you sometimes see a little bit of darkening, and then when you do some editing, like if you typically when I try to darken the highlights and things like that, then you start to see that vignetting along the stitch lines. So I found that if I tick vignette removal, it removes that perfectly and everything is great. Geometric distortion correction, only if you have actually shot each of your sequences with a wide angle. So if you have got that, then you can tick that and Photoshop's AI will try to correct that too. But as I said in the video, it's better to avoid using the wide angle if you can, for sure. Content aware fill transparent areas. You can select that if you want. I don't. I just crop them out personally, but if you want to give it a try, you can. So for this, I've got all my images selected, vignette removal, blend images together. I've got it on auto, and I click OK, and I let Photoshop do its magic. How long it takes very much depends on the speed of your computer. My previous computer used to take ages, and now I've upgraded to a new computer which has got a 12 gig Radeon graphics card. It has 64 gig RAM, a brand new AMD processor, and it is much faster, and it does this in a fraction of the time it used to. So we'll let it work away. And there you have it, magic. It's done straight away, and amazingly, so I did this really well, and it stitched it together perfectly. I have minimal transparent areas around the edges, and a large portion of the images it perfectly. And amazingly, thank God, the top of the cloud here is not cut off here. So when I crop into this, I'm going to keep that bit of cloud. So that has stitched together perfectly. The next stage is to come up here to the crop tool. Now this is where I always select the crop tool for this, because then I can choose my aspect ratio up here. So I can choose the 16:9 if I want to. You've got some standard options, or I just come in here and select what I want. So I'll try maybe a 4:2. A 4:2 looks good here. You can try a 3:1 to see how it looks, and then move this up and down accordingly. So I could do, as we saw, the 16:9. These are typical 3:1 is a good pano. 4:1 if you've got a very long, narrow pano, or sometimes a 4:2 works well. So I like this one. This is a 4:2. So first thing I'm going to do then, I'm going to choose that, and now I'm going to bring this in here to get rid of my transparent areas. That's perfect. And then I'm going to move this across here to compose my image. So that's what I want. That's really nice. Let's come across maybe a touch more, or come in a touch more. So I want to start here at the edge of this mountain range. This is the Karavanke mountain range here, and then blends into the Kamnik Alps here. So these are the Karavanke Alps. They border Slovenia and Austria. And these are the Jamnik Alps. This is Mount Stožić here, the one that sits right behind the church, and the rest of the Jamnik Alps here. So this is really, really nice. I like this. And then now I can crop. I want to crop in a bit here, keep that top of that cloud, and I want to put my church slap bang in the middle. So that's nice composition. I quite like that. Let's get rid of this bit of these bits of the trees here. So we can do something like that. So I can compose like this, and if I like that, then I come up here. I usually just click this to then crop out the rest. And there I've got. Now you can see, amazingly, look, if you go in a bit close here, you can see where it's stitched it together. It's incredible what Photoshop does. So when you've done that, come in here, I'll flatten the layer, and that gets rid of all of that. Then I can zoom in and go around my image to make sure that everything was stitched together nicely. And quite frankly, with most images, unless you've got a lot of movement, cloud movement or things, it seems to stitch it together perfectly. Absolutely brilliant. The detail is incredible. So there it is. That's my first one. I'll first of all save this, and I'll come in here. Let's go into Panoramics. Let's give it a name. Jamnik. This is Jamnik Church. Hey, come here. Jamnik Panorama 1. You can save it as a Photoshop PSD, or I save it as a TIFF at no compression, maximum file size. And you can see here that it's a 16-bit. I've taken from the raw. So all the detail is there, and now I can work away on editing this image. So usually the first thing I do is I'll come in and I'll tweak the highlights a bit, and let's bring out the shadows a touch in on that foreground. Let's bring that out. And then, so I've created this directly from the raw, but what I love about Adobe Camera Raw is that I can use it as a filter. So I can open this TIFF, if I go to filter, Camera Raw filter, I can actually open this TIFF in Adobe Camera Raw and use Adobe Camera Raw's features too. And the reason is I love this dehaze filter. So if I come in, I tweak the dehaze here a bit, I can bring back some of the color in that sky. Lovely. And I can tweak the vibrance a touch here. I've got a perfect histogram here. See, no gaps either end, so it's perfectly exposed across as we did. And then, you know, various other things that we can use here. I won't go too much into that now, because the purpose really was to show you the panoramic itself. There you go. I can save that. That's saved. Now, why would we do a panoramic like this? A scene like this, sure, we could pull back and capture that scene with a wider angle. But two reasons. First of all, when you pull back to a wider angle, you introduce barrel distortion and warping into the scene. But second of all, Yes, you can capture this in one shot, but you're going to capture it at the maximum resolution of whatever your camera is. Okay, I'm using a Canon R5 which has 48 megapixels, so it's pretty big. But by doing this stitch panoramic, I will now show you, if we go to image size, look at that. On the height I've got 7,600 pixels. Now that was again why I said to do it vertically, because I've maximized the pixel dimensions on the vertical. But on the width I've got a whopping 15,200 pixels. That's amazing, isn't it? If we now switch that, if I switch that to centimeters, that is 128 centimeters at 300 dpi. That's printable 300 dpi at over 1 meter in width. 1 meter and 60 centimeters in height. So without even doing any upsizing, we could make a 1.2 meter print of that. That's incredible, isn't it? And even, as I said, even when we cropped in, it's still got a massive resolution on there. We put that into inches. If you're into inches, it's a 50 inches wide, 25 inches tall. So that is the primary advantage of doing a panoramic, to get this massive file size, massive image that could be printed really big. So it could go on somebody's wall, for example, or they could make a massive canvas to go on the wall or something like that. So that is really the primary reason for doing a panoramic. So let's try one of the other sequences. So again, we'll come in, automate photo merge. I'll pre-tick the vignette removal because I know I'm going to do it. And let's come. Now this was the very last sequence that I shot. And for these, I went in, I zoomed in much closer. That great bit of cloud had kind of gone. So this one I'm zoomed in closer. Now you can see I've got a lot more frames. So let's select them all. But if we look across here, you see, yeah, in these cases here, I did a couple of shots, as I mentioned, during the sequence. I also thought about a couple of shots that could also be good on their own. So in these areas, there's a lot less, well, more overlap actually, and more frames, but that's not a problem. See, you can still select them all and Photoshop will still seamlessly blend them together, and that's what's great. So within this sequence I've got my pano, but I've also got this one and this one, which are potential standalone shots. So let's select those and click OK, all set, and let's go for it. And there we have it, a nice wide pano in this case. So I'll come in here to my crop tool, and this is a perfect 4:1 or 3:1, depending on how you want, but I think this will make a good 4:1. So again, minimal transparent areas around the edges, so I can come in here and here. Let's crop in, so we've cropped that out nicely, and now I can think about the composition. So let's place again that church right in the middle. That's nice, and let's crop that, and there we have it. Yeah, that's lovely. Again, let's come in here. So I've got a nice bit of shadow down here, and this area the light was falling beautifully. The sun was starting to go down behind the hills, it was getting lower, so it's cast some nice shadow here and some lovely light around here. So again, first thing I want to do is flatten the image, and then I can come, let's tweak those highlights, darken down those highlights there to really emphasize that beautiful bit of light in the middle there. And here, I don't even think I'll bring the shadows out, I'll leave them like this. Again, open up an Adobe Camera Raw filter. Let's tweak that dehaze. That's nice. A bit more highlight adjustment there to bring out the detail in the sky there. That's nice. And click OK. There's more I can do to that, but again, this is not an editing video. So again, let's go to image size. Look, now I've got a massive 31,206 pixel wide pano with 7,800 on the vertical. Let's switch that again to centimeters. That's 264 centimeters wide, so that's a 2.6 meter wide print with a 66 centimeters on the height. Inches, 100 inches wide, 26 inches tall. So that's a nice 4x1 massive pano that can be printed even bigger than the other one. Well, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video, and hope you now see how useful the Benro leveling tripod is and the shutter app when it comes to shooting panoramics and doing stitched panoramics. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. And catch you later.